Hi, everyone. Carl Steinbeck here. Good evening. Want to talk tonight about other indicators that this grand extortion scheme that we heard about in Charlie Adelson's trial is really a farce, and we all knew that. And it's so obvious. It's the most ludicrous defense theory I've ever heard or seen in any kind of case I've been either involved with or seen on TV or what have you. So it's really so preposterous that they would expect any jury gullible enough to believe this story and to have Charlie think that he was going home because all he had to do was score at least a 70 on his testimony. And his attorney, Daniel Rashbaum, said he scored a 95. So he was prepared to go home after the closing arguments and deliberation in that Tallahassee courtroom. But as it turns out, he was dead wrong. His attorney was dead wrong. And as we know now, he's there in right nearby Leon County Jail at the corrections annex there for Wakulla. And it's only about a 20-minute drive from the Tallahassee jail where his mother is, Donna Adelson. So the irony of all that, of them trying to get Wendy out of Tallahassee, and now we got basically two Adelsons there up in the Tallahassee area for the indefinite future. And for Donna, obviously, once she's convicted, she won't be in the same complex as Charlie, same prison complex, but she'll probably be in Northern Florida as well, is my estimation. So, anyway, the irony of all that, and I thought that this is something that I'd mentioned before, and I didn't really go into a lot of detail on it before. So I thought it would be a good title for tonight to address the issue of another key indicator of this farce defense theory. And so that has to do with the idea that the Adelsons never said well, for example, Charlie, he said he never told anybody except his mom after this supposed extortion happened, after Dan Markel was murdered. And then he supposedly didn't tell his dad about it until the Matsuri restaurant luncheon after the bump happened 2 years later. So we're supposed to believe, under this theory that he presented in court, that only his mom knew about it up until the undercover FBI bump in 2016. And yet his dad doesn't find out about it until that spring of 2016. And his mom and him kept this from Harvey this whole time. There's no way, the way these people talk among themselves, that they would have kept this under wraps among themselves. And what I also was looking at was what kind of a person that has $8 million in their bank account, so we saw from Charlie's trial, would sit there and be a victim of an extortion racket that's basically a IOU on payment terms with 0% interest spread out until you pay the $333,000 without consulting anybody to tell them that's the worst thing you could do is pay that money, because it makes you look guilty as all get out. So it makes it looks like you hired them to kill Dan Markel, and you're making low-level payments over time so that you're keeping their silence and so they don't buy extravagant items and look guilty therefore. And so I thought that in looking at the attorney involvement with them, also keep in mind these people are very litigious. There's lawsuits a lot of times they've gone after people with. You heard about the lawsuit with Charlie and his friend Ryan Fitzpatrick. You've heard about other lawsuits that Charlie's involved in that was having to do with some kind of a disability. And so there's also issues involving other attorneys. Keep in mind, if you got $8 million, you got a lot of attorneys on speed dial. Okay. And so for Harvey to sit there and have no initiative to call his attorney up, keep in mind also who his best friend is. His best friend is Peter Weinstein, and he was a judge down there, and a state court judge, and he's from the Fort Lauderdale / Coral Springs area. And he has that ability to reach out to him and ask him, what do I do? My son is being extorted. And yet, we don't hear anything about that. We haven't heard a single story of who Charlie said this to and who can corroborate it. Did they really go to an attorney and say, hey, I'm being extorted? How do I handle it? And so that leads me to the next deduction, which is no attorney that you talk to, no attorney that's a criminal defense expert would ever tell their client to keep a lid on it and don't go to the police. We don't trust you. So I know Daniel Rashbaum said if his own son was being extorted, he would not go to the police, and that's just not accurate. No defense lawyer would legitimately make that assertion, especially was involving their own family. So I can just tell you that also what I look at is communication among attorneys is also a very key indicator of a co-conspiracy. And so what we have here in this case, what we've heard from the wiretaps, when the wiretaps happened in 2016, we heard Katie's conversation with a Jim Lewis, a criminal defense attorney there in the Miami area, and he was talking to her, and he was letting it be known that Charlie his attorney had been in contact with him, and he's saying that they're keeping quiet, they're not going to go to the police, and he was asking her to do the same because that's what Sigfredo was doing. So there you have a wall being built among the co-conspirators, and that only happens if they're really truly guilty. Why in the world would Charlie's attorney, who was I have it written down here, it was David Oscar Marcus. He's like a really successful attorney in the state of Florida. He's probably one of the top couple in the whole state, criminal defense attorney, and he represented Charlie. So you mean to tell me if he got extorted that he wouldn't be going to this attorney and asking him how to do this and help me go to the police? And then you're telling me Harvey, he wouldn't go to his best friend, who also, by the way, was like the godfather of sorts for Wendy Adelson. So they have this close connection with all these attorneys, these high-priced attorneys and well-connected judges. And keep in mind, this Peter Weinstein, he was a previous state senator. He was even like, I believe the Senate majority leader for a time there in Florida. So he was extremely connected, not only in South Florida, but also in Tallahassee, having that state Senate connection. And so what we see here is that there was no effort to present any defense that Charlie had told us to any attorney. So if he doesn't trust the cops and he has all these attorneys at their disposal and Harvey's attorneys as well, and yet they never bothered to talk to an attorney. Why? Because if they did, they would have told them what's really going on. And then they would have told them if that extortion really happened, they would say, you need to go to the police. We'll get you there. Think of what Peter Weinstein and his clout he had there in South Florida, reaching all the way back to Tallahassee. Think of how he could have helped protect them from any rogue type of law enforcement and maneuvers being conducted by the Tallahassee Police Department or the state attorney's office or even the FBI. I mean, he could have called these people up, and he's got all kinds of other people that are well connected in Tallahassee that could have made this go very smooth and easy for them. And so what we're led to believe is that with access to all these lawyers, that the Adelsons decide to just sit there and go, you know what? If we're gonna be arrested for this, I'll tell my story then when I get to a jury trial. After I spent all the money to hire an attorney, after I spend time in jail, because think about it, you're not going to get bound out of jail on a murder one charge. So they're willing to risk that rather than go to the police with all these high-powered connected people that could have them do the right thing. It just makes no sense. This is so ridiculous. So if you notice that in the cross-examination that Georgia had for Charlie, she asked a number of probing questions about communication between the attorneys. And I just happened to see that either yesterday or the day before on Justice for Dan Markell. They had a nice little short clip on that, and it actually talked about, it actually showed that portion of the trial where Georgia was asking questions about communication from his lawyer to the hitman's lawyers. And the reason she was asking that is precisely because we had that Jim Lewis conversation with Katie. And they may have probably other wiretaps or, excuse me, not wiretaps, but other texts or other information that is yet to be seen. But I think the more digital evidence they find and look for on this case, the more I think it's going to corroborate all this. So what I do as an attorney, as a prosecutor defense attorney, I'm looking always for what kind of communication is there between counsel, because that kind of really sheds light on whether they're innocent or guilty. For example, I once had a sexual assault rape case in the military, and I had one of the co-accused and there was another co-accused, and they were trying them both together. And I didn't reach out to the other attorney because I knew my client was innocent. I'd done initial research. And when we had a pretrial hearing, the case completely fell apart. But in between, before we got to the case falling apart for the government, the I asked this attorney, I said, hey, why aren't you asking more questions on cross-examination of these government witnesses? I said, my instincts were like, are you trying to like cut a deal with the state behind my back or something? And he was like adamant, no, 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 I wouldn't do that and whatnot. And as it turns out, I did eventually find out that day that indeed he had worked out a deal where his client was going to roll over on mine. But the case for the government, meanwhile, fell apart through cross-examination of the government witnesses, to include the alleged victim who wound up invoking the Fifth Amendment rights to remain silent. And so the case crashed and burned. And I just really, I made a teaching point to him. It's like, you don't ever burn a defense counsel like that, especially in the military, whereas we got the whole U.S. Army apparatus to fight against and trying to put our clients behind bars. So anyway, it just gives you a example of how if there's a conspiracy, an obvious conspiracy between co-defendants, you actually do want to link up with the other attorneys and make sure you don't have somebody else jump ahead of your client and go to the police and then rat everybody else, because they'll get the best sweetheart deal. That's normally the way it works, unless obviously depending on prior felonies and all that kind of stuff, it'll depend on what kind of deal you get, and also involvement in the conspiracy and how serious of an actor they were and whatnot. But I would say this: if you look at Luis Rivera, look at what a great deal he got. He was a key player. He was with the hitmen. He was driving much of the time, and he was basically the guy that was there to help fix whatever Sigfredo would screw up. As we know, Sigfredo had fired the weapon in the Prius that they rented, and it shot a hole through the gas line. And between the two of them, they were able to get help, and they were able to get that gas line fixed and continue on with their paid mission to kill Dan Markel. So when you think about that aspect of it, he got a 19-year deal. He's serving that concurrent with a federal prison term that he has, and he's not even out of federal prison serving that sentence for that federal crime or crimes that he committed. So the bottom line is he got a great deal. The state needed him, though. Absolutely, he was critical to help pin these convictions on the other co-conspirators. So in any event, I think that if you look and do a deep dive into what there was for communication among the defendant's attorneys, you definitely see a pattern here that they're trying to circle the wagons. They're trying to firewall all the defendants from the prosecution, and they don't want anybody to spill the beans. So other than Luis, think about how tight of a control they had to keep that original core conspiracy intact. And if you realize that Luis Rivera was never supposed to be part of this conspiracy. That was somebody that Sigfredo brought on that Katie did know about, but she never relayed that back to Charlie. And so the Sigfredo desire to have another guy go up there with him, his best friend, is what really helped unravel this supposed perfect crime that the Adelsons had put together. And so that's why if you look at the when the bump happened, they're talking about this other character and is the brother of the character in jail. They had no idea what what this undercover agent was talking about. And granted, they thought he was they didn't know if he was a true brother of somebody else that was in prison. But that's why Charlie was so bewildered and he didn't know what was going on. And if you notice, he never asked Katie, did Sigfredo bring somebody else up there? Who's this other brother of a Tato or Tuto? And so that's what I think was really a huge blunder on the part of the Adelsons, to think they could pull this off in broad daylight and to trust somebody like Sigfredo Garcia, who was heavily involved in drug usage and whatnot. So it turned out to be a big blow up in the Adelsons' face. And so I think that if you look at this from the standpoint of what communication was going on with the attorneys, and why didn't the attorneys then go to the police, right? So that's a real huge clue right there that that there was something amiss. And I would say that if you also, Georgia did not bring that up, that that there was communication between the attorneys, but I was thinking she might want to do that through through Katie, and she could bring it out through Katie, and there could be hearsay exceptions that she could bring out the testimony of Katie having that conversation with Jim Lewis. So I would think that that's something that that will be pursued. Got some weird things here on the screen, but okay, I'm good. The other thing is, keep in mind Peter Weinstein's son, Michael Weinstein, he's also a criminal defense attorney, and he and Charlie know each other. And so why wouldn't Charlie even call him up and say, "Hey, what's going on? Being extorted?" Of course, you're going to do that. And so I think that's just very telling on the fact that the supposed extortion was a complete farce, a complete sham of a defense. And I think you'll see more of that in the upcoming trial with Donna, that it was a sham. Because keep in mind that they're probably going to say, "Oh, Donna didn't know anything about it. She was just brought in as a person trying to help this her poor son, and she took his word for it and stuff like that." But I think the thing is, Donna also said she mentioned this to 10 or 12 of her friends when she was on that wire, a recorded conversation she had with the hitman, excuse me, not the hitman, the undercover agent on the bump. And so, did she really talk to 10 or 12 friends of hers? I would hope the law enforcement would go around and canvass all of her close friends that they have the ability to track and interview and find out what she told them about this. I think you'll find probably some good information about that. So, just looking over a couple of notes here. Keep in mind also, Gary Cohen, he's listed as a government witness on the last trial for Charlie's trial. So that was another, he's like a family law attorney, from what I recall. And he was one that they didn't wind up calling as a witness. But again, to show you, he has some knowledge of something going on with the Adelsons. And so why would he be put on the witness list? It's more contacts and connections to have with lawyers. Because like I say, rich people, they have, if you got $8 million, you got attorneys on speed dial to fix any problem you get as soon as it pops up. And that's what they would have done, unless they're trying to hunker down and not tell lawyers what's going on. But I believe that at the point the hitman got arrested, they definitely talked to attorneys. And I believe that they even had attorneys getting involved previous to that, because they were looking at giving out joint public statements. If you recall, that there was a joint public statement between Rashbaum representing Harvey and Donna, and also John Laurel representing Wendy. So having those joint statements put out there saying that they're innocent and there's nothing to tie them to the crime, I thought it just shows again that these attorneys are all being joined at the hip, and they're trying to do a joint effort to create a firewall between them and the other hitmen. But what they also did is talk behind the scenes to the hitmen's attorneys, as well as Katie. So there you go. That's how it really works if you have a guilty party on a conspiracy. So that's my key point tonight. I did want to say one other thing. I did, if you notice, the last couple times I've moved my time up an hour earlier. I did that to accommodate the East Coast viewers. And I just looked here before I came on tonight. In the last 90 days, for example, the biggest city, I can do a breakdown of the audience, and the breakdown shows for the viewership, the biggest number one city for that is New York City. They got a big lead over LA. And then next comes Toronto. Number 4 is Sydney. Number 5 is Chicago. And number 6 is Melbourne. So that's really interesting that we have two other countries in the top 6, and 2 of those are from Australia. So this is a shout out to you other folks there in Canada and Australia for supporting the Justice for Markel effort here. And number 7 was Dallas. Number 8 is London, the UK. Number 9 is Phoenix. Number 10 is Houston, which I think is the top 5 in population for the United States. And then number 11 came in Tallahassee. Tallahassee, if you go to different different time lengths, Tallahassee has been in the top 10 before. And then number 12 was Atlanta. So anyway, I thought I'd just give a recognition of our foreign country support and the Justice for Dan Markel experts effort. So if you guys want to go ahead and shoot me questions now, I'll take your questions now. If you have asked questions previously, I'm just going to jump down to the newest comments first. So repopulate that as well so I can see it. If you can, put a triple red question mark there so I can see it. Okay, Lillian Hernandez is asking, when do I believe Donna's trial will start? And you're from Tallahassee. Okay, well, I think it will start probably in the May time frame, maybe June. And we'll find out more on the hearing on the 12th of February when there's another status conference there. Darth Legend 07 is asking, in Wendy's potential trial, is one perjured statement enough to get in all her testimony, or would she have to have perjured herself in every piece of testimony they want to get in? No, all you need is one material aspect of the case that she lied about. That would be enough to show perjury. And of course, the more you show, the easier it is to carry your burden as a prosecutor and prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Yeah, somebody's asking about London. London was number 8, so there's a lot of new folks as well. I'm not trying to do a lot of questions that those of you are following the case so well that you would know the answer right away. So Lisa Mana is asking, why does Charlie get special treatment with a safer prison than other criminals? Why is it so special? Well, there is the issue of, because of the Latin kings that he's testified about having a effort to go after him, and we have also the issue of the Aryan Nation, which would definitely target a Jewish person in prison. So I think that's a couple of issues. They're trying to avoid prison violence. Not to say he can't in an open bay. He's in an open bay with probably like 80 guys, I think it is. If you're in an open bay like that and the lights are dark at night, I mean, you still got to sort of probably watch what's going on, just because these guys claim that they're in fear and that they want special treatment. It's not really special in terms of the food isn't better or anything like that, but they're just going to be around folks that are also scared of violence against them. And so what happens is those people could also fake that they're scared just to go in there and actually put a hit on him. So you're not totally safe in any prison. I don't care even if you're in protective custody. And I've said before, we had somebody in federal protective custody up in Ohio a couple years ago where a Jewish male was murdered there in prison by Aryan Nation. So it's not definitely a safe place. It is safer than general population, I would say that, but it's not totally safe. Maya's asking if Donna thinks of any other defense will that hurt Charlie's appeals, asking because of what Katie said was Sigfredo's appeals and why she waited. I think that will not affect Charlie's appeal, because they'll just look at the record of trial. The record of trial is like the entire record and any exhibits. And what that does is the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court would only look at that record. They're not going to look at stuff that's going on in other trials and whatnot. Now they could, jump on just for entertainment value, but they're supposed to only focus on what the record is before them. So that should have no bearing whatsoever. It could be an issue where Rashbaum is concerned about something he raises that's completely different when he raised in Charlie's trial. So I think that's part of the potential conflict you have in cases like that. Law and Lit saying, "How can anyone keeping quiet about the truth until day one of the trial makes sense to you?" Yeah, I mean, it's just so ridiculous. Endless Universe saying, "Could Rashomon be recognized as a co-conspirator?" No, he's not. He's a defense attorney, and I think you're talking about the issue about the conversation he had about fleeing the country. I don't see that being an issue at all. I think he's not going to want to bring that up. I don't think the prosecution wants to try to pull him in as a witness. I've said that before. I think they don't need to try to sever the attorney-client relationship because basically all states have it where you can't be a witness to a case. You're also the advocate lawyer for. So that's a conflict in and of itself. So Carrie B's asking, won't Georgia have to dance carefully around a question about communication with attorneys? I think she went ahead and asked a question about Charlie's attorneys having communication with other co-conspirators. That's fair game to show that they try to get their ducks in a row and help each other to cooperate and not um, and not be helpful to the government and turn states evidence. So C stars asking, do you think prosecution will consider Harvey's age? I don't think so. If they're ready to go forward and they feel like got enough evidence and that they got a digital trail, why would you do that just because of his age? I would say no. I don't think that's a factor. It may be a factor they consider because maybe the age is just a sympathetic factor for a jury, but I I think the way they've treated the Markells and the denial of visitation, the way the boys have been abused, I don't why would you hold back on that? I mean, think about it. If you have all the Adelsons arrested, they have to get the boys new custody, and so that's what I think would be the most just thing. Sally A's asking, do I think Katie will get a better deal to testify against Wendy? So I, th- she's not. The way it works is you don't get a deal per se. You're just at the mercy of the state post sentence, post judgment. You're looking at if you decide to cooperate with the state at that time. It's basically on the initiative of the state. The defense normally, like in federal court, the defense can um, can ask for some kind of a post government motion for reduction based on cooperation, and the state will normally give some kind of recommendation. So it might be the same way like that in Florida, but there's not a deal per se where the defendant says, "Look, if you shave my life without parole down to 25 years, I'll cooperate with you." I don't think Florida works that way. I'd be very surprised and shocked if they did. So it's more like you cooperate, and if she testifies in a couple more trials, then I think Jack Campbell's office will assess it as being, well, how key was she in each of these trials? How much did she tell the truth? How much did versus how much did was she still trying to shade the truth and lie? And I think that'll be determining whether they make a recommendation to the judge to have a exception to come off the life without parole. So it's still a waiting game for Katie. She's not going to know that till she's done fully cooperating with whatever last trial they want to use her for. Amy C is asking, do I think Charlie actually told his lawyer what happened, or is his lawyer only hearing the once removed extortion plot from the family? You know, I think that I think my guess is that Charlie came up with this and then told his attorney, and his attorney couldn't think of anything better to say because it's just there is no good defense. I mean, the wiretap, what they have for the out of their own words to convict him, their own words really convicted Charlie and what conversations he had with his mom and also with Katie and also with his dad to some extent. So his own words convicted him. And so that's something that I think he probably told his mom and dad at some point and told her in Roshbaum and they sort of ran with it and said, yeah, yeah, that's a good idea. So I just think it's he had nothing to work with. And so it was going to be extreme outrageous and ridiculous. And I just said you might as well have had some kind of alien theory. It's about as ludicrous. Glamis girl saying Georgia would rather give prosecution a try with Winnie than and lose and let her off scot-free. Yeah, I mean, there's no way. If you know somebody, she's named as an unindicted co-conspirator. Once you figure out you got the best evidence you're ever going to get against her, you go after people like that, and you let the chips fall where they may. And maybe they're hoping there'll be a rollover at some point by some other Adelson. But I would say that once they decide they got the best evidence they're going to get, and they're doing this one at a time approach, so I think she'd be next versus Charlie after Donna's convicted. I think we'll see Wendy arrested in the near term after that. And so, yeah, I mean, I think if you, as a prosecutor, know in your hearts that somebody committed a murder, you owe it upon yourself and you owe it to the community you represent to prosecute somebody. And even if you get an acquittal, I would say, it's not going to, if you feel like time is not going to be on your side, why not just go ahead and go for it? And there's no way you would ever get an acquittal on Wendy's case anyway. So go for it and get, if the worst case would be a hung jury. And I don't think there's any way you'd get that. And even if you did, figure out what is it, 11-1 vote to convict. You just had one outlier or whatnot, and then just try it again. And that whole time she'd be in Leon County Jail. Caroline C is saying, does Wendy's attorney know about the evidence before Wendy testifies? Her attorney, John Laura, would have known exactly what evidence there was against the Adelsons. I'm sure that was shared among defense counsel. He wouldn't have a right to it just being a lawyer for Wendy. But if you look at the way, I've said this before, if you look at the way the interaction between Rashbaum and Wendy there in the courtroom, it looked so rehearsed. It looked so practiced and calculated that way that it was it definitely was not a true cross examination. It was the kind of thing where it looked to me like it's something where all the questions were worked out in advance. The attorneys would have been emailing forth and back and saying, ask this, don't ask that, and they would have ironed it out in the weeks and months before Wendy would have testified. So that's the way it works if you have folks that want to help each other out. Chateau is saying, if Wendy testifies in Donna's trial and has the total lack of emotion that she had in Charlie's trial, can that be used against Wendy in her trial? I don't know that a prosecutor have to bring up the emotion per se. I think if they were going to do um, the charges, like I said, to bring charges for perjury, then I think having a videotape way of proving that up rather than just a transcript would be the best form of evidence to present. And I think the jury could see that emotion then, and you could comment on any kind of body language you want to. So that's something that I believe is relevant. Her lack of emotion and lack of concern, you can tell. You can just see the hatred for Dan Markel, and so I think that's something that jury will definitely pick up on. And I think that's why she's been helpful to convict everybody so far. So she's 3 for 3 every time she testifies. You get another life without parole. Lisa is asking, as a mother, do I do I think Donna will make a deal to save her kids, as in take the fall so Wendy does not get arrested? Perhaps Charlie could use mom's admission as a reason to appeal. I don't see that happening because Donna is thinking she's going to get out of jail here in a few months. As soon as her trial's over in May, let's say June, she's going to be walking home. She's going to be riding home with Roshbaum. So I don't think she's going to do that at all, and she's not going to take the fall in agreement for Wendy to get arrested, not to get arrested. I just don't see her doing that. And if she tried, I don't think the state would say that, yeah, that they're willing to cut a deal. Because I think they got a strong case against Donna. They know it, and they're not going to, well, they're willing to cut a deal if she's willing to roll on the other co-conspirators, but not to not to let somebody off the hook, unless it was maybe Harvey. That I could see maybe that's something being worked out, but letting Harvey get off scot-free, I don't know if the state would do that. But maybe if they got the other 3, maybe they wouldn't worry about Harvey so much because they figure he's not going to probably make it to trial, through trial and conviction and appeal. Modified Mod is saying Katie's covering up for Wendy. Why? Yeah, that's a good question. It's just it's she's not been fully forthright in her testimony. I don't think so. I think there's more she's trying to hide behind, and I just don't get it. I think she thought she was going to be set up for life with the Adelsons if she maintained her innocence and didn't point the finger at them. And she's saying she's conflicted because Sigfredo's facing a life sentence without parole. That's the father of her children. So I don't know. I think she's just not really reacted well at all. And the poor kids have suffered. Now they have loss of both parents when she could have been home with them if she had just told the truth many years ago. Watercolor Mama saying when Isom told Wendy's there was a shooting at her house and she didn't react at all. Then he said it was at her ex-husband's house and she started boohooing. Has this indicator been noticed at all? I think it's on one of my indicators or her reaction to being told. If you go to my list of indicators from probably I think 10 months ago now, that's something that I think I mentioned at that point. If it's not on there, then I would have mentioned it on another channel. Carla Martinez is asking if I think the Adelsons paid for the attorneys for Sigfredo and Katie. Well, I know for Sigfredo, he initially had Katie pay $15,000 cash as a retainer, and then when he couldn't get any more cash to him, that same attorney named Sam or Sam, he wound up filing for court appointed status, and he wound up becoming a court appointed attorney from that point on. So, with that being the case, that didn't apply there. So, why wouldn't he cut a deal? It's really bizarre how his attorney couldn't get on a flip. Then the other thing is, I would say for Katie, yeah, the real question is how did she afford three attorneys at the defense table? Why would she go to trial a second time when she's offered basic immunity, get out of jail now? So it looks like there was some kind of golden parachute that she had for the rest of her life. And so it's just one of the worst outcomes I've ever seen. The absolute worst outcome I've ever seen from you have the ability to get out of jail on a murder one charge, life without parole, and you turn it down, you go to not one trial, but two trials and get convicted. The second trial and the first trial was a hung jury, 11-1 vote to convict. So it just makes no sense why she couldn't have gotten, why she couldn't have cooperated. Because as we know, she was guilty in being a part of this conspiracy. And she finally admitted that in so many words. T.S. Jackson saying, what is an attorney like that to do when somebody like Katie refused a deal like she did? Well, if I had a client like her in Texas and if I'm court appointed, I can ask to be removed, but I believe I could have gotten her talked into cutting a deal. And it would have taken some time. She would have built up trust. And I would have told her, look, you can go see your kids right now, or you can spend life without parole. And I think that's the real conversation. A lot of attorneys do not have with their clients. They're not told how to do this, by the way. I've never seen a defense counsel workshop or continuing legal education course where it talks about how do you talk to your client when they're overwhelmingly guilty. So it's probably something we need to have out there because I think a lot of attorneys just avoid it. It's a very uncomfortable, especially if they're a high paid attorney for the case, and you have very serious charges here. You can get $1 million, let's say, out of the defendant, your client. Are you really going to be honest with them and tell them straight up in the first time you meet them after looking at all the evidence that you have no shot of winning the case? Well, you're going to get fired. They're going to want most of all that money back. So it's just that kind of like money sort of, I think, gets in the way of candid advice for attorneys. And so I don't know what exactly happened with Katie's attorneys, what they talked about. I wasn't there, obviously, but there's no way I wouldn't have gone to trial with her on that. If it's overwhelming, she wants to go down on that. I would say I'm not going to sign up to a suicide mission like that. Sorry. Life 30's asking. I know there's a lot of newbies learning about skates each every day, but do you ever get bored with being asked the same questions each time you go live? You know, I just appreciate there are more followers on the case because I think the more followers are on this case, on this channel or any channel for that matter, I think it does help build pressure and momentum for the state and holds their feet to the fire to do the right thing and go after them. So I think that I worried about you guys being bored with me having to ask some of these same questions that if you followed the case for a year or 10 years, you'd know the answer right away. So if and I'm just looking for questions so you guys may answer it for them. And so I don't see that. So maybe they get the double answer, your version and mine as well. So Schmeconomics is saying, which case do you think is more winnable, one against Harvey or Wendy? I think they're both winnable. I think Wendy has more indicators of involvement. There's further data point indicators. I mean, if you really broke it down, I would say just roughly, could probably be 200. And so if a prosecutor shows those 200 indicators, Charlie's going to have nowhere near that number, but there's still solid, good indicators as well. And I think when you get the digital evidence, I think there'll be more with Harvey than Wendy in that regard. So maybe that could be different based on what the discovery shows here. So it's too early to say for sure. But right now, from the information we have available, I would say it's definitely Wendy. But like I say, it's good enough for both. Sarah Graham Burrell is asking, who do you predict might be new witnesses for the prosecution based on new digital evidence? Well, they would have the forensic law enforcement guys come in there and testify to that, sort of like we had the Sergeant Corbett, who came across so flawlessly and brilliantly as a witness for the state. I think if they get some computer guys like that to say this is what we extracted from the phones, this is what we got from the like a lot of records now, they have affidavits certifying that this is like records that they obtain in the normal course of business. So a lot of times you have that certificate there, and you don't need to have the person from the company actually testify. So if it's like a Gmail record, you could have as a prosecutor just that particular record custodian come in there and whatnot. So unless there's something really beyond, you want to really challenge it and have that custodian of the records there as the defense for cross examination purposes, and you really just are going to stipulate to it and not have it be an issue. Stuart Donaldson is asking, the family connections of politicians would have resulted in swift police action protection if you report the extortion. Surely they're the worst type of extortion targets given this link. Yeah, I totally agree. That's what I'm saying, is that they would have had the clout behind them, like the most powerful, probably the most powerful judge in Florida backing you up and going to the police. Granted, he's not there in the local area where he's practicing or sitting on the bench at the time, but given back his time as a state senator and Senate Majority Leader up in Tallahassee, he's got tons of powerful connections there. And so, yeah, they had the perfect setup to be able to have people give them credibility for the extortion. So that's something I would bring up as a prosecutor. This was my case in Texas. Bertha Z's asking how easy or difficult it would be for Charlie Adelson to win an appeal and for how long is the process. I've heard that the attorney came on another channel recently, the appellate attorney for Charlie, and said he's going after a couple points, one of which ineffective assistance, meaning that they're saying Rashbaum was ineffective. And that's a lot of times the easiest way to get in a reversal of the conviction, is having that be an issue. So I'm not going to predict anything like that, other than that I would expect that there would be the conviction be affirmed and not reversed. I don't do appellate work, by the way. I focus on everything on my case to win at the trial level, and that way I don't have to worry about appellate work. And if I do have to work a deal out, I work a deal out ahead of time. I don't let some train wreck of a case make it to a jury and then wind up going to the appellate mode at that point. So I really don't have that. I really haven't had that situation really at all in my career. Chloe's mom is asking, do I think Rashbaum will talk Don into waiving speedy trial? I think they're just going to agree to a trial date. If you do speedy trial, it has to be done with like in 45 or 50 days. I don't think they want to go to trial that fast. as a matter of fact, is asking, do you think Charlie was told the truth about how ridiculous his trial strategy was and how the jury got it right since he's now in prison? I'm not talked to an appellate attorney on any case that I've ever had, so I don't know how what their process is for meeting with their client. And granted, his attorney now, his appellate attorney, is just right up the road, just 20 minutes away, so he could go see Charlie probably anytime he wants. But most of that kind of stuff is they're basing it off the record and not new stuff the client says. So he doesn't really need to see the client that much like you do in a trial as a trial attorney. As a trial attorney, really need to spend a lot of time with your client, go through all the evidence with them, and really make sure that you got your defense theory down pat, and you got all the witnesses that you think are relevant to prove your theory. M. Christina saying no evidence beyond a reason without the Donna knew beyond what Charlie told her. No, I think there is evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. I think it looks like she was totally involved. I mean, the hate and all that kind of stuff that came from her and whatnot. I don't think a jury's going to think by that for a second. Tennis girl's asking, have you seen anything that could be a legitimate reason for appeal? I sort of just answered that. The lawyer has supposed to be good, but if you don't have anything, yeah, I mean, the chance of appeal is probably like 5%, 10% in the best case scenario. So it's not expected to win. I didn't see anything that was going on that'd be outlandish. I did think that the one initial ruling by Judge Everett could have been a reversible error where he wouldn't let the issue about Latin Kings come out. Initially, that was something that Georgia had moved to suppress from defense raising, and I thought that was a bad move because that could be reversible error. But then the judge later on came back and said he would allow him to present that as part of his theory of the case. So I thought that was a smart move by the judge. So I didn't see any things that were really bad for the state and securing the conviction and making it stick. Oops, I hit the wrong button here. Beach Mom is saying, do you think a gag order will be requested and granted? I don't know what you mean a gag order for who and for what reason. I mean, I think you're maybe talking about for Rashbaum to go on the circuits talking about the case. I don't see that being an issue at all. He's definitely not helping the case, in my opinion. I mean, why would you object if you're a prosecutor? He's just showing his cards. Debbie M. Can or will Wendy take the fifth at any point going forward? Well, if she tries doing that, there's a statute that overrides it, which actually I think is unconstitutional. But Florida has a statute that says that if you're called as a witness, you cannot invoke the fifth. You got to testify and cooperate, and you have use and derivative use immunity. We've talked about this a number of times, so I can tell you're new to the case. But just to summarize it super fast, she cannot plead the fifth, and if she refuses, then she could be arrested and put in jail until she does cooperate. So that's the real incentive behind her, and that's why she's being forced to cooperate. Yeah, somebody thinks I got a toilet here in the background. No, it's not a toilet. That's actually it's like a cork table made out of cork. So no, it's not a toilet. Williams Evans is asking, do I think this family's drug use led to Dan's murder? They all are making sure that each other's getting their doses for open phone calls and Lacaz, benzodiazepines. Yeah, I think there is some truth to that. I think it's more in America than just the fact that we have the Second Amendment access to weapons. I think it's really an issue of drug usage. If you look at Americans, we have less than 5% of the population, but yet we have 65% of prescription meds are consumed by Americans. And so if you look at any of the kind of shootings around here, school shootings and whatnot, every single time I've seen about it, any information about it, you always find out they're on benzos and other drugs like that. So I know some people rely on them and they're very critical at different junctions in their life or maybe long term. And I think ultimately there's 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 such an addictive nature and they're so hard to get off, and a lot of people can never get off them, and they continually up dosage, and that causes a lot of brain damage. And also, if they're drinking alcohol or having other drugs combined with that, it's a wicked cocktail. And if you look at a lot of celebrities that die from drug overdose and stuff like that, they usually always have one type of benzo. I think there's like 5 or 6 different types of benzos, from Xanax, which is shorter acting, to Klonopin or Valium, and those can really not only just mess with your mind in terms of make you violent when you otherwise wouldn't be, but they also can change your personality as well, and they just don't know it. It's called medication spellbinding, where they don't realize that they've changed their personality over time, and you can't talk or reason with them most of the time, I would say. So yeah, that's I do think that is an issue here, and whether it's an issue in this case because they were on those kind of things, I'm sure it's something that would not have made them peaceful. Let's put it that way. Claire is Lucas asking from London there in the UK, what grounds for appeal does Garcia has? He has been very quiet. Yeah, I don't want to help the defense at all. So there's something that I could mention on that case, but I don't want to mention it publicly because I don't want anybody getting ideas. So sorry, I can't answer that for you any better. Teresa's asking, will Wendy testify for the prosecution in Donna's trial? That's what it looks like. I think that they definitely will use her to testify against her mom. Can you imagine that, testifying against your mom and then she gets convicted of first degree murder, and her and her brother did it for you, and then you have to testify against them? Queen Bee is asking, what if Charlie admitted the extortion was a lie? Would that affect his appeal? So I guess in what context would he admit to it? If he decides to roll over and admit this whole thing was a lie and he wanted to do what, cooperate now? So yeah, that probably would affect his appeal. They would probably know about it. I don't, it's not, they only go by the record, so I'm not sure exactly how that would be handled by an appellate lawyer. Whereas, because you basically have the same thing that's going on with Katie, where she's now admitting that as well. So the I don't know if the state would be able to supplement the record and say here's a transcript of where Katie admitted to lying, and same kind of thing with Charlie. So I don't know exactly how that work in Florida, but it definitely complicates it. I think it would definitely put a snag in their appeal. Shy Girl's asking, do I think the state has any significant evidence that Wendy was having independent conversations with Katie through WhatsApp, maybe on a burner phone on Katie McBanwell's iCloud? I don't know that they even asked for it. Hopefully they did. Don't know if they asked for it, and so I don't know if they have it. It doesn't look like it in the discovery matters, but they've done more searches, subpoenas for documents and whatnot. I didn't see one that indicate they were doing it for WhatsApp, so hopefully they would do that, but I don't think they have. Stevie Evans is saying, didn't Wesley perjure herself already to the judge when she lied about Gibbers? Yeah, they didn't bring up Gibbers, the nickname she had for Dan Markel, in the trial against Charlie, but she did in the previous trial to Katie, where she said she didn't know how to spell it, yet it was programmed in her phone, and Georgia got her good on that. So I don't, to have perjury's got to be something a little bit more material to the case, I think. But I would say go ahead and add up all the lies, and it just shows the fact that the biggest lies and ones that are more material are definitely something that wasn't a mistake, but it's a pattern and practice for her not to be honest in her testimony. Chloe's mom is asking, how long does it take to get phone records back after subpoena? It all depends where you're asking them from, what and how far records go back. Some phone companies, cellular companies only go back 6 months. Others go back like a year and a half or two. All right, we don't need to have comment like that. Marta Morales is asking, why has Donna requested a speedy trial? Well, she hasn't asked for a speedy trial yet. Technically, she's not asked for it. They're trying to have a quicker trial date, but did not actually invoke the speedy trial. And Marianne Cancel is asking, Wendy must know she's perjured herself in the last 3 trials, so why does she keep trying to testify and bury herself? Is it because she has no choice? How is she going to get around that? She can't get around it. And that's the thing with this statute. If you don't cooperate, you could be arrested. I mean, that's what Judge Everett threatened for Harvey and Donna, that he was going to have them arrested down there in Miami area and have them hauled back up and stuck in jail until they cooperated. So that's what he would do to Wendy if she didn't cooperate. Kathleen Martin brings up that director Harvey Weinstein was nearly 80 when he went to trial for sexual assault. Yeah, I don't know what he was for age. Yeah, he did look up there in age. So yeah, definitely. Why would you let age be something that prevents you from being prosecuted? Are we going to give a green light to 80-year-olds and above to murder people? Yeah, and Bill Cosby was in his mid 70s. So Soil Doc Sherry is saying, if Rashbaum does contradict statements between Charlie's and Donna's trials, can Georgia call that out to the jury? So no, what the attorney says is not going to be used against different clients. That's never allowed. So if a witness has different contradictory testimony and they were in both trials, that's something that attorneys could bring out, but not what the attorney said. Somebody has 3 questions. Okay, I don't see a 1, but Brooklyn Rules is asking, do I think the Adelsons' judicial connections held up justice for Dan? Yeah, I think so. I think there's definitely something there, that their clout they had with folks all the way up into Tallahassee. I think that affected the case. I think that's why we had the previous state attorney Willie Meggs say that there was not enough evidence to go after any Adelson, and if they did, that they would have civil lawsuits against them, or were these civil lawsuits? Because the evidence is sufficient and it's overwhelming. Dreamscape is saying, if a client admits fault to a lawyer and then wants to go with the let them prove it defense, that ethical for a lawyer to do? Yes, it is. And that is something that is the way our American jurisprudence is. The government has to prove their case beyond reasonable doubt. You're presumed innocent until the government establishes evidence that you're guilty to that extent. Then you should be, unless they can do that, then um, you should be found not guilty if they can't meet that burden. And so I would say that, if the client says, "Hey, I'm guilty, but I want to see if the state can meet their burden," then that's pretty much like a legal chess game. And so the different angle of that aspect is if the client admits that they're guilty and then they want to get up there and get on the witness stand and then lie and can tell a complete fabrication. That's where it's unethical for an attorney to allow that to happen, and for them to ask the questions knowing that they're actually inviting perjury. So that's a different twist on that. Hey, Mona's asking, do I think the witness list will be any different for Donna's trial? I think it will be a little bit different in terms of, a lot of those, most of those witnesses they didn't even call. So they're probably just going to put the same witnesses on the witness list, and then they're going to add a few more for like digital evidence type things. And hopefully they interview more people that Adelsons might have talked to down there in Miami. That's the kind of thing I see prosecutors miss a lot. They don't talk to enough people. The law enforcement don't. So I just don't think they're going to. I think they leave a lot on the table, but there's enough there to still get them. Jessica's asking, do I think Harvey will attend Donna's trial? Well, if he's put on the witness list like he was for Charlie's, he might be on the witness list again. And so if he's on the witness list, he could not watch the trial until after he's done testifying. And if the prosecution says he's not subject to recall, if a witness is subject to recall, they still have to be outside the jury, outside the courtroom. They cannot listen in. And so obviously they may listen in on their the court TV coverage. And I didn't recall seeing any instructions for the witnesses not look at their phones and follow the case. So it really doesn't do that much good to have them sequestered outside the courtroom when they can just look at and see what's going on in the trial on their phones. Sort of like what happened with the jurors on their phones watching what happened before they got called in to testify in that Murdo hearing the other day. Charlie McWhorter's asking, what percent do you think Wendy will be convicted? I think they're going to prosecute her, and I think there's no doubt in my mind she would, but that she would be convicted. So Margaret's saying, is an open pot easier on Charlie Adelson than traditional prison? It's really a individual aspect. Would you rather be in a cell with a bunkmate and you're locked up in something that's maybe 6 feet wide by 12 feet long and 8 feet tall? It's really, I in one hand, you'd probably deal with one person than let's say a room of 79 other people. But if these 79 other people are maybe less threatening than the one you have as a bunkmate, then it all depends. Lisa Mona's asking, can the state subpoena the teacher for one of these kids to see if they know anything the kids have said? I don't think they're going to subpoena them. That what they would do is they would just go forward and interview the teachers. They don't need to subpoena them if they then found out something was helpful. But I don't think they want to interview teachers to see if the kid said something. I doubt they're going to get anything from the teachers. I think it's more likely the what would be helpful is what the Adelsons, the adult Adelsons, are telling their family out there, their the friends of the family. Kayla Davis asking what evidence against Charlie Harvey other than not contacting his lawyer, friend, judge. Well, that's what I covered last week. So if you want to go to last week's session, that's on there. No, I don't think Charlie's going to win on his appeal. Tammy Holder's asking, do I think Dan saw this coming at all? No, I do not. I think he didn't know what these people were capable of doing, and if he would have not he would have done something different, I think, so he had no idea what he was looking at. No idea. Joe Griffin is asking, is Donna's defense locked into Charlie's double conspiracy nonsense? He says he's got something different he's gonna present, but, she's just gonna complain ignorance or whatnot, so that's I think what their game is. It's pretty obvious, and so it's not the same sense as that he was not the one being she was not the one being threatened, but there's still enough evidence there that to believe that there's no way she wasn't involved in this. It wasn't just like an innocent bystander trying to help her son. Yes. Sir Tedrick Walker saying Harvey signed the title of his car to Katie. Yeah, that's one of the things that would be used against him at trial. Yeah, I don't know why the IRS didn't come after these folks. Why they don't have the state revenue folks in Florida like they do in other states because they don't have income tax there in Florida at the state level, and so there's not. I don't think there's like a state IRS equivalent there. But the feds, yeah, I don't know why the feds wouldn't have looked at all that handling of cash. Okay, Trip Show, you're saying no one ever calls on you. I just want to say thank you. Okay, well, thanks. I've not seen your questions before. I'm sort of going through them here. If you would type them in red question mark, I don't even know how to type a red question mark, so can't tell you how to do it. But if you type red, that jumps out at me the quickest. So I can't get everybody, but I'm trying to get as many as I can. And I'm looking at the question. I'm not looking at the name. So Cat Love is saying, do you think the sentence for Katie will be used as a bargaining chip for testimony against Wendy, or do you think she's lost credibility? No, I think they can still use her. I mean, she definitely can. She doesn't look like this big bad person that can wield all this power over Adelsons and force him to cough up a third of $1 million. So Jim Parsons saying, if you had to throw a number out there right now, how certain are you that Wendy will get convicted? What percent sure are you? Well, a lot of it has to do with how good the prosecution tries to bring out the details of the case. And so I think if they do a competent job and they bring in a lot of graphic visual displays of the information like they did in Charlie's and sort of show the timeline of all Wendy's behavior and actions, I think that's how they would get a conviction the easiest. But there's no doubt if I was prosecuting her with this kind of evidence in Texas, there's no doubt I would have in securing a conviction. Carol Mitchell is saying, asking why Detective Isom introduced a victim advocates in the room for Wendy so soon after his fact-finding mission. Was that a tactical move? Yeah, I thought that was really odd that it was like 40 minutes into it, a victim advocate comes in there and it's sort of like they're done thinking she's a suspect. They pretty much cleared her at that point from what I gathered, because you don't bring in a victim advocate for somebody that's still a suspect. So I think he made a decision that she was being credible and acting appropriately. But if you really break down the more times you look at Wendy's interview, and it is an interview, it's not an interrogation. Interrogation is what you do after you have all the evidence available and you definitely know that the person you're interviewing is a guilty party, and so they didn't have enough information to know she's a guilty party. So he was throwing her softball questions, and so he asked a number of good questions, but he never tried to get her pinned down too hard. I mean, part of that was because she's an attorney, he's maybe worried about her invoking, but he never asked he never asked really threatening questions that were more like an interrogation where you're accusing somebody of lying and saying you're basically trying to force them to confess through different means of pressure, legal means of pressure. Joy Matt is saying you're waiting to hear from Tamara, Rob, and Amy. Yeah, I would say not so much Amy, but I think definitely Tamara and Rob would be key witnesses to bring out in future trials. Watercolor Mama saying, don't you think the Markel sons are beginning to put two and two together to see Ben's discomfort with Wendy as bar mitzvah indicates he was possibly beginning to wonder if she killed his father? I didn't see that part of it where I was able to notice his reaction like you're describing, so I can't really comment on that. But I think that I think a lot of the public exposure is maybe making them curious, but I think a lot of people in that kind of mentality where they're sort of like in a that brainwashed cult, I think they're just so trained not to look and consider other information. But eventually, I think they will. Hopefully, it won't be too many years in the future. But I think that it would be, most of us, I think, would be very curious and want to think, especially if you get your uncle picked off and convicted. You don't see him for over a year and a half now. And now your grandma gets arrested, who's been a main caretaker for you, and she's charged with the same murder of your dad. Yeah, if that doesn't give them a wake up call, but I think the real wake up call would happen once their mother is arrested. Lily Pat is saying, does anyone ever ask Katie if she said I know after Sigfredo told her the deed was done? Yeah, because that's what Luis Rivera says. I don't recall that being the case. That's a good question. If anybody else knows the answer to that, please jump in. Linda Mon is asking, does the state consider the Markrell boys as far as taking Wendy to jail? I don't think that's a consideration. That's a frequent question. People ask, say, well, are they just waiting until the boys get older? I don't think that's an issue at all. Hmm. Yeah, I've gotten like an email from somebody that was saying they can't type, they have vision problems, and they can only listen to the channel. And so that was very sweet to see that email that they like found this case, and they can't really see, they can only hear. So I'm trying to enunciate as best I can and not talk too fast, but trying to strike the right balance there. Sandy Shea is saying, if Luis hadn't been in prison, do I think things might have unfolded in a different way? I think that might have helped that he's already in confinement in federal prison for, I think it was like a racketeering or drug kind of charge. But I think the real, I think the real reason he agreed to plead guilty, from what I understand, is the fact that that investigator there, criminal, she's like a private eye, Monica Jordan there in Tallahassee. That's who the attorney for Luis Rivera had as his legal assistant on the case, PI on the case, and from what I understand, she spent a lot of time talking to Luis and getting him to see the fact this was a smarter decision, as it was, to cooperate. Look what a great deal he got. So I think Monica Jordan and the attorney there had a lot to do with it. Teresa M is asking, do I think Isom suspected Wendy on her interview at the police station and was just keeping her talking, or was he completely fooled by her? I think he was completely fooled by her for a period of time because it looks like they weren't really targeting the Adelsons from the first weeks after it, even the first months. Because I think if they suspected the Adelsons being involved, I think they would have right away gone for the Sun Pass, told records, told video and whatnot of what vehicles that looked like a Prius were headed south on camera within the hours after the murder. DR Delmont's asking, will I cover other trials in the future? I'm thinking about doing that. I'm thinking about covering maybe the case there in South Carolina with the Murdo and that issue about the clerk of court. That was really a disturbing thing to see. The clerk of court trying to hijack the whole case, the biggest notorious case in the history of South Carolina. And this clerk of court tried to just hijack the whole process and interject herself into the jurors' minds. It was really, really bizarre to see. So I'm looking at that some more, and I may cover that. And then I'm looking at covering maybe some other cases down the road where there's things that I think would be beneficial to look at from the standpoint of how the American justice system works or doesn't work. PhD nutrition is saying, is Dr. Graber trying to become a witness? I just wonder if does he have, he's up there in age, like Harvey's age, I think. Is he getting dementia or something like that? That could be an issue. Or maybe he's being paid to say favorable things about the the Adelsons. But I sort of question that though, because he's the one that tried to look up the Adelsons. He didn't have their number, know how to reach them. So he was calling around trying to figure out how to reach Harvey, I guess. So if it's the other way around, then if it was paid for the defense to make a statement, you think it'd be the other way around. So I don't know why he's sticking his neck out like that, making those bizarre comments. Veronica Schneider saying Wendy claims she speaks Spanish. Could she flee by land to Mexico? Well, I think if she was going to fly out of the country to Mexico, I think that'll be a little bit tougher. There's probably some alert on her. I think if she was going to drive through Mexico, I think that's really dangerous to be driving through Mexico these days with all the cartel violence down there. CBC saying, is there any spousal protection with Harvey and Donna? Yeah, what we have in the United States is spousal privilege, and what that covers is communication among spouses. So any conversation between Harvey and Donna, if Harvey tried to testify against Donna, Donna's attorney can invoke the spousal privilege, and then Harvey couldn't talk about anything that was said between them, but what he could talk about is actions. So like things involving money and that kind of stuff. As long as he didn't bring up the what was said and just what was done that or not done, or however whatever the case is, that the evidence is helpful to the state. That's something that they could bring forward. Hey, Mona's asking, the judge said 175 days from arrest or hearing. Well, that's normally what they have for somebody in custody, but speedy trial is a different matter. And so speedy trial is like the 50 days, and it shortens to 45 from the because you can have the trial as soon as 5 days in that speedy trial thing. So, but the defense has to certify that they're ready to go. They're fully up to speed on all the evidence of the case and ready to go forward. So they're not going to be able to make that assertion because they still haven't gotten all the documentation that they've had from the forensic search warrants. Sandy Shea is asking if I think the financial benefits in the Pearl Harbor tech we've delved into more deeply in the Donna's trial. I think all the information should be gone into on a deeper level with all of them involved, including Wendy. I think the more you show Wendy's guilty, I think that the more it shows Mom's guilty, and the more you show Charlie's guilty, the same with Donna. It makes her more guilty, and same with Harvey. The more you can tie in a family guilt together, the easier it is to get a conviction. All right, some surf was called off in Oahu. Okay. Yeah, the Corey Richens case, I think that's the one out in Colorado where she bought some drugs off of a drug dealer and killed her husband that way. I would say here, John is in Dallas. He just got back from an overseas trip. Yeah, if I cover the Corey Richens case, my numbers would spike. Yeah, I really want to cover something I'm interested in. I'm not so worried about if it's how notorious the case is, but I don't ask for super chats because I don't want money inducing me to select a question. I'm trying to pick the best questions. I don't want to feel obligated to pick a question based on somebody giving me money. And it takes time from you guys listening to other relevant questions. So that's why I asked you guys, just keep your money. I don't need it. Oh, thanks, Glamis Girl. Thunder Queen is asking if I'm following the Jennifer Crumbley case. I've seen that name in the news. I think she got convicted. So I don't know anything about it. There's so many murder cases going on now, and there's so many that it seems like they're coming out of the woodwork. It's just I could make this a full-time job and not cover enough cases out there that are really insightful and bizarre and downright nasty and disgusting, right? Evil. Justicia Mora is saying, what would you say to people who don't want Wendy tried because the boys are still young? Okay, well, under that theory, all of you that have had children to raise, if your spouse had you murdered, do you think your spouse should be able to maintain custody of your kids the rest of their juvenile years until they reach 18 before that person gets prosecuted, your spouse gets prosecuted just to save the kids? Or, the other theory is if they're being raised by someone that evil to kill one of the spouses, the mother or father of the kids, why would you want that person raising the children? Wouldn't some of those character traits be passed down? Do you really think that you would be mentioned to the boys or girls that you had in your home in a loving way and what a great person you were if you stayed with the kill if the children stayed with the killer and grew up that way? No, I don't think so. So I think there's a lot of psychological damage that would occur by them staying there longer with the murderer. And so I think in that particular case where you have, granted, it's going to be a shock. If Wendy got arrested, can you imagine the shock to the boys? But, having them picked off one at a time, I think I think kids are better off knowing the truth rather than being deceived and lied. And I just don't see that being an issue. And I think the denial of visitation is what really is the worst thing because it's bad enough that they're living with the killers, but the fact is they don't get to see the innocent Markells who have suffered tremendously through all these years. That's the real outrage. Anne Marie is asking what I think they would charge Wendy with, murder or lesser charge. Well, I think they charge her with murder, and I think that also charge her with conspiracy and also maybe not the solicitation, but normally they charge all three for co-conspirators. But I think they also should add the perjury for each of the trials. Allison's asking if I'll write a book when all this is over. No, I haven't thought about that. I'm not going to talk about Wendy's signs of mental illness because that's as a prosecutor not something I bring up in court, and I just don't want to go there. But I know there's a lot of information out there about it already. So, as a prosecutor, I've said I and a defense attorney, I totally understand all the DSM diagnoses and what the different signs are and stuff like that. So I think it's important as a trial attorney to know those things, to know how to push buttons on different people and what motivates them and how to extract information from them. So, Marianne Kinsella is saying it seems like there's so many women on trial for first degree murder these days in a very high profile cases. Seems like the same narrative for all. Anyone else seen these lately? Yeah, I mean it does seem that way, but there's also a lot of men still doing it too. So yeah, it does seem like there's an uptick of women. My suspicion is that I bet you every one of these is probably on some kind of a medication, some kind of psych medication. I'd be surprised if they weren't. Let's just put it that way. It's possible. I'm not saying all of them were, but yeah, there's that potential. Shara is asking, why is Wendy allowed to spin language on the stand without being corrected by Georgia, such as interrogation instead of interview, killing instead of murder? Well, there's a lot of stuff she can highlight that she did not highlight, but I mean, she still cross-examined her a lot better this last time. I mean, she went after a whole lot better than she did the previous ones. I think part of it is they don't want to go after her too hard because they're trying to keep her conveniently available to be able to use her testimony on one hand, but also be available to the prosecutor later. And if you look at how she came across, I mean, she came Sorry about that. I think I'm back here now. I had a wrong button. That's all it took. Trying to scroll down and ask questions. I don't know what button I would have hit to do that. So Rainy D girl saying, "What bogs my mind is the frequency of dismemberment. So gross, gruesome." Yeah, I agree with that. It's really sick what these people are doing. Julie Railing is asking, "Will Charlie be able to talk on his iPad phone for hours on end like he did the other jail?" I don't think that's the case. What I'm hearing is that he has to wait his turn. There's like a couple phones and whatnot. So I don't think he's going to have those marathon calls like he did before. He's definitely not going to be able to talk to his mom directly, right? And I'm sure Wendy's not going to talk to him. So really, it's just his dad and his attorneys or attorney. We have a visitor here. All right. Leo, watch out. Stay away from the cords. Lily Flores is asking, do I think that Wendy, if she gets charged, that they may call the friend she went to lunch with and stalk the party as a witness? I think the stalk the party, if that was, I would flesh all that out. If I was a prosecutor, I'd have the investigators flush all those details out, no doubts. And whether you'd use it or not, have to determine how helpful they are. If they don't, if not helpful, then I'm not going to call them. But if there's some ways that you can help use that to indicate guilt, then I would definitely do that. There's Leo. Christine McLeod is asking, do I think the 911 response was suspicious? The operator didn't seem to take the call seriously, and it was the police who asked for paramedics to come. Could the Adelsons have the influence? No, I don't think that was the case at all. I think they just had a bad 911 operator that day. I mean, what a disaster that was. But I remember hearing about a case where 911, someone called 911, it was on hold, or they goofed something up in New York City, and they were in the process of being murdered, and the police never showed up. Police never got dispatched. Wesley John Holmes is asking whether it'd be in the state's mind to interview the children. So you're talking about Ben and Lincoln there. I think that's something that is a possibility. I just don't think they're gonna go there. I don't think they want to upset the boys, and I think they would probably, yeah, I don't want to go down that road because I don't want to give them any ideas of what to bring out for the defense, but I just don't think that's gonna happen. They got enough evidence elsewhere. Sorry, I don't know what's going on, why that I'm trying to scroll up to find some more comments, but yeah, Carmi girl saying it's been confirmed the stock to bar party was legit. I I know there's a invite that was shown. I don't know if that's a legitimate invite. I'd want to talk to people who actually had the party, so I wouldn't just go by an invite. Sean Hennings is asking, do you think Harvey and Wendy know that they are next? I think that Wendy probably is just trying to think in her mind and trying to tune everything out, that she didn't do anything wrong and they don't have anything against me, and I'm just gonna think happy thoughts. So I think that's what's going on in her mind. Harvey, I think he's probably losing a lot of sleep at night. Stuart Donaldson is asking, there was a photo of Wendy published this week moseying along the sun-kissed Miami beach. Charlie and Donna will inevitably see it. Could it be the kindling that blows this case up? Okay, you're in the UK. The something like that could trigger. I think it's going to take more than. I think it's going to help if they do see that photo. I think it's just they're just going to. It's going to help build to that. I don't think it's going to be something that blows it open yet. It's going to be eaten on them. I'll tell you that. I'm sure it's going to be eaten on them. She sells saying asking, do I think that these YouTubers going over this case daily with all the calls and details will help Wendy when she gets arrested? I don't think so. No. I don't think anybody's commenting on it that it makes her look innocent or anything like that. So can't think of one is asking whether Robert Adelson, the doctor's son up there in New York area, will be called to testify and to the family's character for Donna, Wendy, or Harvey's trials. He's not going to really be a character witness. Would it be as a fact witness to talk about how the family could really go after and zero in on someone they didn't approve of? And what you have also is how they reacted. I think that's the biggest factor he would be able to talk about is why he saw how strange they're acting after Dan was murdered, that he was suspicious of the way they're acting and the way he probably couldn't talk to them about it made him think that they're behind it. Thunder Queen is saying if Wendy and Harvey had burner phones, can they be wiretapped? Well, I guess are you talking about phones right now? I don't think that would be the case. They're not going to be wiretapping the phone lines now. There's a high standard to be met for that. I just don't see them doing that, and especially they have. I think they got enough evidence in terms of digital type that they're going to get from their emails and iPads and whatnot. So I think they'll be fine. T.S. Jackson's asking, what do you think Wendy would have done if Isom hadn't told her right away that Dan wasn't going to make it? Yeah, I wish she would have. I wish she would have done that differently too. But yet again, it still worked out beautiful. I think you really showed how she was not really concerned about details about Dan. Didn't want to go up there, see him, get out of there. I mean, she's willing to spend 5 hours there, not worried about anybody's going to see. Never once did she say, from what I recall, anything about who's going to go up there and check on Dan. He can't die alone. That wasn't said, right? You'd say that. You'd want to be there with the boys and stuff like that. So it's like she's more interested in planting seeds and um, diversions to take the police off the Adelson trail of guilt. Joy Matt says, I think the Adelsons feel justified in what they did to Dan. They'll never learn the nerve of Charlie too. I'd like to maintain my innocence right after Fillmore kills victim impact speech. Yeah, he never said anything about, yeah, it's terrible what they did. I didn't have anything to do with it. Dan Markel's a good guy. I mean, they basically are just still dumping on Dan. Even Rajbaum said Dan wasn't liked by everybody. I mean, why would you even say that? It's just really bizarre the way these folks are acting. Crispy Custard asking, after the bomb, Donna told Charlie to go over to her house after Harvey had left. Why would she do that if Harvey was in loop? Well, if you understand what was going on with Harvey, Harvey doesn't have the best health. He was 70 around 73 at the time, and so he was on different kind of medication, stuff like that for blood pressure as well. And I think they probably wanted to know that they had this under control before they bring this to his attention because he'd probably freak out. And so I think that's a perfectly normal thing. I'm sure defense would try to argue, well, see, he wasn't a part of it because they didn't tell him right away. Yeah, but they told him. I mean, he discussed it with Charlie at the Matsuri Japanese restaurant. Matter of factly, he wasn't ticked off. But that's supposedly when he first found out about extortion. So, and there would be a huge conversation, be a blow up conversation, and it wouldn't be mentioned and whispered in the Matsuri restaurant. They'd be talking about it in the house. You think he's going to wait at a restaurant to talk about it? Now, granted, he suspected law enforcement maybe having eavesdropping or whatnot in there, so that's why I think he was trying to talk in a public restaurant. But there was definitely not a conversation about that. Hey, Dad, guess what? For the last 2 years, I've been extorted, and I've only told Mom. And I mean, this is so ridiculous. Timothy Squires, Carl, what's up with all the high profile cases come out of Florida? Is that simply the cameras in the courtrooms? You know, I don't know for sure. I think that helps make it easier to follow. I mean, look at this case, all the evidence we're able to see ahead of time before a trial. You don't have that in other states. So I think that also what brings attention. But you also have a lot of these spousal hit jobs or hit attempts going on. And so I think that's really picking up in terms of numbers. And I think more and more courts are allowing cameras in the courtroom. That was something you never really heard of when I first started practicing law. I don't remember anything about seeing trials that much being televised, and it has to be a pretty serious case for news uh, news channels to want to cover it. Most attorneys don't have these newsworthy cases, these ones that make it on Dateline in 2020. So unless you're in a big city and you have to be handling a lot of these cases where there's a lot more murders. Jennifer's asking if when he found out about it at the celebration dinner where she threw up, would she be guilty of a crime? If you just find out about somebody committing a crime after the fact, you're not guilty of that. If you do something to aid and abet after the fact, you could be guilty of something there. But that's just not the case. There's too many other indicators. If you want to look at what I've talked about on another podcast presentations I've done. Rosemary Romero is asking, did Charlie and Don ever attempt to pay the undercover for the bump? What was the end result of the bump? Did Adelsons ignore the $5,000? I don't think they did. What I think I would argue as a prosecutor, and this did not come up at Charlie's trial, but what I would be talking about is, if you remember, there was a gift card that Charlie got for Sigfredo. It's like a gift card. What guy buys another guy a gift card? And he said there was something special inside of it. That's why I think what they did is they were trying to decide if it was true law enforcement, and that's why they're talking in code. And I think the way what they figured out was like we got to sort of split the baby. We don't want to keep on getting extorted and tell them no because we're worried about them going to the police. But at the same time, we don't want to give it to the undercover agent because then if he's maybe an investigator for the Markells, then it make us look guilty, like we're willing to pay off people to maintain silence. And so I think the best option they came up with then is give this birthday card to Sigfredo, stick 5,000 bucks in there. Therefore it's not directly tied to the threat. And the $5,000 is an add-on gift. And there's no connection between the undercover agent and Sigfredo, then at least there's he got an extra $5,000. And but if he was connected, then that would be a way to pay it more under the table. So I think that's what happened. It makes the most sense. Rainy Day Girls asking, don't you think they had private conversation on the boat? That's what mobsters do in the movies. How funny it would be if they had boat wires on the radio for the rest of them. Yeah, I don't know about they wouldn't have done that on the boat, but yeah, that's an option that law enforcement could possibly have. Caroline A is asking, was this part of your 100 quite suspect when she asked the detective if she was going to read her Miranda rights and was she thinking in the car maybe she was suspect? Suspect of what? Yeah, that sort of ties into what I've said. I mean, no lawyer would get in a squad car, leaving their vehicle behind and going to the police station voluntarily without knowing exactly what's going on. You just wouldn't do it. Even though she's not a criminal expert, she she's I think was really shocked by that. And I think that helped her maybe get into this fake crying mode that she was like upset that just in hours after she went by Trescott, there she is being hauled off in a police car to the police station. And so I think she was. I mean, that was her whole job to figure out if he was buying the idea that she's not a part of this. And I think hers thinking the car normal person would not get in the car unless they know they're not considered a suspect, right? Caroline Zaya is asking if anything ever happened to Jeff LaCasse, can his previous testimony statements be used in future trials or Wendy's trial? Yeah, I don't see that being an issue. His testimony is so critical. They're going to have him live in there. So let's say if he was sick and couldn't make it to trial or something like that. If they had a deposition and it was recorded, then they could be recorded back into the trial. But if they don't have it previously recorded with that particular defendant in their testimony, then it would not be admissible. That's the way the normal rules of evidence work across America. So I would say that this particular case, that would be one advantage for having a deposition. But you got like Detective Isom wasn't available the last time, and they just worked around it. But Jeff Lacasse is such a critical key witness for this case. That would be a good reason to take a deposition of him before trial and have it on videotape to preserve it, right? Especially when you're waiting 10 years. I mean, there's that's one of the things that the longer you wait to go to trial, the delays oftentimes help the defense because evidence tends to stagnate and degrade over time. Debbie Martin saying she can't follow Donna's part in the extortion. So Donna knew about Charlie's extortion. 2 years later, she has her own extortion. How does Charlie explain it with the FBI? Yeah, I mean, it's just so ludicrous. It just looks like a. That's what I'm saying. As a prosecutor, you want to show how this family acted in concert. They're very have a cult pack type mentality, and nothing got isolated and stovepiped. It was all done with a meeting of the minds. Taylor Burton's asking, what did Charlie whisper to Wendy at dinner per Jeff Lacasse, or which Wendy immediately vomited? Well, Jeff Lacasse wasn't there. If you notice what Charlie said that she did it in the bathroom, not at the table there. So don't know if that even happened. It could have just been made up or something. Who knows? But we're not getting the straight story on that. And it certainly wasn't. She was upset because that's the first time she had food in weeks. So I just don't believe that at all. David Kelly's asking, it appears less than 1% of U.S. court cases break through to create such international interest. What's your theory for what makes a state national case if it's of truly international interest? Yeah, I guess I don't know what other cases the international folks overseas and whatnot are following. I think this one automatically has an international flavor because the Markells are from Toronto. And as I said earlier, Toronto's, what is it, number 3 on the list? Yeah, number 3 for following this case, at least on this channel. So, and he was from there and whatnot. So I think that this outrageous nature of the case and the fact that it's taken so long to prosecute these Adelsons, I think that's what really is really stirring people up to say, what the heck is going on in Florida there? SD is asking, what would they do if to Harvey if he says he has dementia or something? Well, they have, if he wants to raise that as a defense, he's not able to stand trial, or he was clinically or legally insane so that he should not be stand guilty, then that's something that they have psychiatrists involved, both for the state as well as for the defense, and they could have a battle of experts, and that would be done either before trial if it's competency to stand trial or during trial. But if you want to raise insanity and whatnot at trial as a defense, then that's something that you basically have to admit guilt, not guilty by reason of insanity, and normally that's an admission of guilt. So she says, asking, do I think by Donna or Charlie not testifying against Wendy would make any difference? No, I don't think so. I think the more co-conspirators you have testifying against another co-conspirator, as a prosecutor, I like that. As a defense attorney, I do not like co-conspirators testifying against my client because all it takes is one slip of something they say, and it can really go bad for my client. Roger W's asking if Chuck Charlie flips on Wendy. Do I think the state will give him a deal? No, I think they'll wait to see if they use him, how valuable he was in helping the prosecution. Hey, Mona's saying that's the same reason Crystal Rogers case needs attention. Too long to bring people to justice. Yeah, that's a murder case of the girl, the mother, Crystal Rogers. She had 5 kids, and it's a really bizarre case. It's in Kentucky, about 40 miles outside of Louisville. Yeah, teach your children right from wrong. I mean, if they would have been taught right from wrong and not having parents condone, acquiesce, and encourage, or whatever the case is, of this crazy stuff Charlie was doing for his lifestyle, this wouldn't have never happened. Yeah. KTG's asking, why didn't Katie take the deal? Do you think Adelson's paid her off big time? There's got to be some kind of payoff. I can't believe anybody would be that foolhardy to turn down a deal like that. I mean, the odds of that happening, somebody turn down that kind of deal, and the attorneys go to trial twice. That's the most bizarre. I can't think of a more bizarre court outcome than that case. SD's asking, have I ever had a violent client who made me nervous? No, I haven't. I haven't had a. I've had some murder cases, attempted murder and stuff like that. I was a prosecutor on a rape case, and there was like a huge outburst after the guilty verdict was announced, and I know there's some concern about my safety. I wasn't really concerned about my safety though, but I remember the prosecutor wanted my name and address and phone number listed on excuse me, my boss. He was the one rank above me. He wanted my point of contact information, like I say, where I live, and my phone number on the outside of the courtroom after this eruption in the courtroom happened, and there's almost like a fight breaking out. And so I said I didn't want my name on there on outside of the courtroom door. I mean, who would? I don't want somebody showing up at my house if they're not happy with me convicting them. So I remember I had a fight for that, but ultimately they didn't have my name up there. It's like something of that, like there's supposed to be it's an army policy to have like a point of contact in case there's any issues with the building after hours, where law enforcement can call up the person who's in charge of that building and ask them whatever information or something. So I just said, fine, have somebody else, just don't have me on there. But that's probably about the only time. As a defense attorney, I don't think anybody's I can't think of any time I've been scared of. I've had clients start yelling and shouting at me because they're mad at what the government's, charged them with and whatnot. And I'll shut them down really quick because I'm like, you're not going to like rant and rave and yell and scream and holler at me. you know, it's not going to be helpful to me having a sound mind to help defend you by screaming about the prosecutors, and I'm having to take all that raw emotions in. Roger W. saying, if Rosh Holmes gets done a life without parole again, is it the end of his career? No, I don't think so. I think there's always somebody else that's going to be willing to hire somebody, no matter how bad their loss record is. Oh yeah, I said there's some word. Somebody saying YouTube does not like that word. Yeah, I probably said a word. Yeah, I think I messed up tonight on that. Okay, Anna Stella is asking. Katie said that she couldn't take the deal as her partner was facing the death penalty. Since they are Latin kings, do you think it's plausible she feared for her life? Well, first of all, it's only Luis Rivera that was a Latin king. Sigfredo wasn't. They were best friends from since childhood, but he was not a Latin king. Her significant other and father were two children. So, and the fact is, the second time they offered it to her for round two, after her partner was convicted and given he wasn't given the death penalty, so he was life without parole at that point. So even then, she's offered that. So I just don't buy that at all. It seems more like it was a financial inducement to not cooperate. And think about it, she spent that many years just trying to hold out for something better, and now she's facing life without parole, or not facing it. I mean, that's what her actual sentence is. So it may come down a little bit because she's cooperated some, but they want to see how good she does in these upcoming trials before they give her any kind of recommendation or even think about it. Tia Joy's asking whose phone lines were tapped after the bump. Was it just Charlie's and Katie's? Because we've never heard at all of Donna's or Sigfredo's. No, they just did Charlie's and Katie's, from what I recall. They did not do Wendy's, and so and they did not do Donna's. But Donna was talking so much to Charlie, and so they got hers. If they would have gotten the wiretap on Donna, then Donna, we would have had probably a lot of conversation going on with Wendy as well. Thunder Queen is saying, are military courts tougher than civilian courts? I think I think there's a lot of aspects of court martials that are in a sense easier for a prosecutor than it is for the defense, because the prosecution only needs 2/3 vote to convict, and you don't have 12 members on the jury. A lot of times there's as little as 3 on a felony, up to 6 or 7 or 8. If it is a death penalty case, they do need to have 12, and they have to vote unanimous for that one. But I would say that the jury's handpicked. It's not randomly selected from the community, and it's handpicked by the commanding general on base, and it's about good order and discipline. And so there's a lot of issues and concerns that they have on base good order and discipline, and so that can sort of like bleed over into not wanting let somebody get away with committing a crime, whether it's on base or off. You can have court martials from an offense anywhere around the world, for that matter. And so there's a lot of different nuances to that. And think about it, everybody's in the uniform there in the courtroom, and everybody on the jury has at least a bachelor's degree or higher. And so it's a very highly educated jury that you don't see in civilian court. And like I say, you can get convicted a lot. I think a lot easier in a military court than you can in a civilian court. So, and like I would just say the attorneys, you have a much higher standard of how you better conduct yourself, and you better have your client acting appropriately. Like Charlie acted that way in a military court. I tell you what, they would be all over that. He wouldn't get away with slouching like he was and scoffing and laughing. I mean, that a jury would hold that against him. And of course, just the grooming standards alone are so different. You have to have your hair impeccable. So there's that difference, but the rules of evidence are pretty much mirrored all the states and federal courts and military courts. They pretty much have all the same rules of evidence. They may be called a different number, but the states pretty much mirror the federal rules of evidence, just like the military has as well. The rules automatically are adopted within 6 months of federal rules being published. Any changes of that. So, and you're also asking, SD is asking, is there a big difference between defending a military and civilian court? Well, it's very easy for me as a military defense lawyer and prosecutor to go into civilian court, because the rules, like I said, the rules of evidence are so similar, and the professionalism is a much higher degree than in civilian court. In the military, like civilian court, some states you just sit down the whole time during your trial. The only time you stand up is to go up to a witness, maybe hand them a document, and to basically have your opening statement and closing. And so I would say that the defending in civilian court is a lot easier. And like I say, the trying to get 12 people to agree on something is a lot more difficult than 2/3. So it's you have much more rights as a civilian facing the criminal justice system in the civilian sector. Berg itself is asking, have I ever worked with a crooked attorney? I've seen my share of stuff. Let's just put it that way. I don't want to go into details, but I've seen a lot of crazy stuff. A lot of crazy stuff. You can't believe some of the stuff I could tell you. Maybe I will one of these days. Just not right now. All right, we're at the little over 2 hour mark here. So let me jump down to the newest question. KTG saying, why did Charlie look so tired or bored? I mean, just the way he was sitting there all the time, slouched over, his hands across his face like this. I mean, if I saw my client sitting there like this, I would be, oh wow, I'd be all over him. Of course, I would tell him ahead of time. Well, in the military, you don't have to worry about that as much anyway. They understand you better act, sit up straight, have good posture, and whatnot. But Francie Hartzog is asking, how do emotions from attorneys affect the outcomes of trials? Well, I think if you get overly emotional, if you get too close to your client, and you may spend a long time, think about it like with Katie's case, these attorneys spent not just a long time developing a defense for one trial, but they had to go a second time around. And so you're talking about a couple years dealing with Katie. And if you notice the way Tara Kawas acted, I thought she acted very emotionally. You could just feel the emotional connection she had to wanting to convince everybody that her client was innocent. And so I think it was very, very much a case of, hold on a second, my battery's about to die here. So I'm gonna have to sign off here in a couple minutes because my battery's about to die. My MacBook Air can't charge with this bandwidth, and I don't have enough. I have enough ports to plug in for the charger as well, but for some reason it won't accept it. There's too much bandwidth coming in those number of ports. So, okay, with that, I won't have any more questions, but thanks for your attention to this case. Thank you for supporting Justice for Markel's, and I'll see you back here in the near future. Have a good night. Thank you.